85% of the pastors around this world have no formal theological training. 5 million pastors in the 1040 window alone have no formal theological training.
Our marching orders are in Matthew 28, make disciples of all the nations. And one of the ways we make disciples is by teaching them to obey everything Jesus commanded. And that word teaching is exactly what theological education is about. And what organizations like Training Leaders International do is fulfilling the Great Commission. It's not just make converts, it's make disciples who obey.
I created TLI to help Westerners get over to the global church, being mentored by people who understand what they're doing, serving underneath the authority of national leaders and pastors, and bringing the Word of God to them, helping them think through how to study it, how to interpret it, how to put it together in a larger framework, who God is and the attributes of God, and then learning how to create expository messages for their congregation so that they can bring the Word of God in a way that the text wants them to bring it to them.
The church in Ethiopia are really growing in number. The strength of the pastors in addressing that growth is not really matching. The teaching of the Word of God in the church is very shallow. It has no depth. Since the ministers are not really well trained and don't know how to lead the church, there are many charismatic pastors and ministers who are very popular but have no sound teaching, divide the churches.
Our pulpits are sold out to the false teachers and to, the guy who is, performing signs and wonders in every Sunday. So they just give their pulpits.
People are coming to faith in droves, but they're quickly being led astray to those who would pander to their desire for economic stability and everything that comes with that. How do you preach the Word if you don't know the Word? How can you teach it if you don't know how to interpret it correctly? We need those men to be doing God's work in God's way.
It was so moving after a week of teaching a TLI curriculum in Ethiopia. The climax, I taught the gospel for 3 hours. And all of a sudden, the students didn't know what else to do. They just said, we must sing. And for 30 minutes, they erupted in worship because they had encountered a picture of our God in a way they had not seen Him. That's what they were confessing. This is what we needed. This is what we longed for. And now they were going to be able to take this back to their people. Worship is what was created in the context of our theological training.
Training Leaders International exists because Christ has commissioned His church to go. And not just to go to all the nations, to preach the gospel to all the nations, but to teach. We're going into places where these are dear brothers trying to pastor their churches who've latched on to all sorts of things that we would consider false teaching, heresy, but they're just untrained. And we're bringing sound, gospel-centered, theological training to these brothers who are pastoring churches in the jungle, in the city, in urban areas, in red light districts, in Muslim-dominated areas, in Hindu-dominated areas, where there's very little persecution and lots of persecution. But the one thing they all have in common is little to no access of formal or even informal theological training.